Okay, and we're live. Hey everyone, and how are you all doing today? I'm here with Izzy Diab and Sadia Hameed, and we're going to be talking about how a lot of the woke stuff has similarities with Islam, and how some of the criticisms are the same, or how we see it, and how the woke stuff is actually harming the conversation, or has harmed the conversation around Islam, and it's making it worse. And so we're just gonna get right into it. So, hi guys, thanks for coming on. If one of you guys wants to start, we can go from there. See, and I'm already misgendering people.
Yeah. It's funny how obsessive they are about language, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't really bother me being called guys. I've had that. I've had someone shout at me before because I've called a room full of women guys. And I was like, if you're that sensitive, then your life's obviously quite comfortable because there's really much, much bigger issues to be pissed off about in life, right?
Exactly. This whole thing with the pronouns and many other issues are actually trivializing the serious issues. Like this is if mansplaining is an issue to talk about, what of gender-based violence, and it's just it really trivializes the struggle.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, but go ahead.
Sorry, I don't often, what I find is with the woke, generally they are more vocal about stuff that's not as serious. When it comes to the serious stuff, when it comes to complex stuff, they're not really visible often, and they're not really present a lot of the time. But it's polluted quite a lot of things, actually. Like I was kind of steeped in the whole atheist ex-Muslim world a few years ago myself, and that's also become very, very woke now. You know, they're looking for multiple identities that they can sort of rack up their oppression points with, right? So I was Muslim, now I'm also gay, now I'm also transsexual, etc., etc., etc. Because then you get a lot more sort of woke points, don't you? You're considered more credible, and it became a joke in many ways because the people that I was drawn to because they were courageous in criticizing Islam today, I think are jokes and have undone their own work in many ways, and are still kind of undoing their own work because they've adopted this woke kind of dogma recently.
Yeah. Okay, like just I just want to get like some of the stuff that to me struck out, and it was just why I started speaking out against some of this stuff, and it was why I started speaking out in general. First, I thought, okay, people just aren't quite sure what Islam is. That's why, get called a white supremacist or whatever. But okay, there's a paper called A Virtuous Cut, and the paper came out in, I think it was 2001 or 2006. And the paper was about the virtues of FGM. Okay, so it came out February 1st, 2001. Now, it was the virtues of FGM. And if you go down to Africa and you stop FGM happening, then you are again colonizing these poor women. And it's another form of colonization because you're putting Western values on it.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward to end of 2019, the protests in Hong Kong, and they're holding up Union Jacks and they're holding up U.S. flags. There were quote unquote serious people in the United States and in Britain and in like other parts of the West who were saying for them to take on democracy, it's another form of colonization. And then last year, the New York Times put out an opinion piece saying the exact same thing. So, I mean, you can see you can see this everywhere. So that's more of a post-colonial take.
It is.
And and then go ahead.
No, post-colonialism has actually has done more harm than good, especially where I live right now in Jordan, because we blame everything on colonialism, and that becomes a red herring. It becomes the deflection point from which we don't even see our own faults. And in order to progress, we have to see our own faults. But if everything is the fault of colonialism, we're gonna, be trapped in the situation we are in. And yeah, post-colonialism as a form of critical theory it's very similar to critical race theory as well, you know. It's this dichotomy, the binary of the oppressor versus the oppressed, which continues, and it really discounts the truth. It discounts, you know, reality, data. It's really harmful for any genuine progress in any of the colonized states, which are not colonized anymore in the imperialist sense, right?
Oh, okay. Just on that.
Yeah.
So Syed Qutb, I mean, okay, he's not post-colonial. It was before post-colonialism, and, you know, even before postmodernism. But he studied in the U.S. And then, I mean, he comes back, and then you have the pan-Arabism, like the whole identity politics of being based on being an Arab, and then you end up with Somalia and Sudan being considered Arab countries.
Yeah.
I mean, forget even Northern Africa, right? Like, I don't think North Africa, they're Berbers for the most, like, if you want to like be technical.
Technically, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like, if you look at the Syed Qutb stuff, and then I know like a lot of the post-colonial stuff, and you know, people like Antifa, they go back to Frantz Fanon, and, you know, Frantz Fanon was just some horrific writing. I just did not like. I mean, like, it said some horrible stuff. But do you see like a link between like Qutb and some of the post-colonial stuff, or like the identity politics? I mean, like being from the region, or
I think, well, there is. I mean, it might have served as the main narrative here, because when we talk about post-colonialism, it's something that was actually produced in the West, right? It started with Edward Said's Orientalism, and they coined post-colonialism as a term after Edward Said in the West. But Sayyid Qutb has probably talked to the same ideas before that happened. But also at that time, I mean, we had just come out, or we're still, you know, under colonialism in that sense. So he's closer to that period of time, as opposed to what they're talking about now in terms of post-colonialism. Colonialism ended decades ago. It ended decades ago. He was closer to that period of time. We're not that close anymore, right? Yeah. But he did have some similarities, I would say, yes.
Yeah, no, I was just like, because like when you look at some of the stuff Qutb did, he was very, very strong on the identity and the identity politics. Now, like I'm not saying so much Qutb took it from post-colonialism. I'm saying like people like Said, you know, might have gotten inspiration from Qutb, you know, to come up with their ideas.
Yeah. No, but with the identity thing, it's also, so here's the thing with post-colonialism, probably the only thing that I might agree with is after Sykes-Picot happened, we were left with a struggle to define our own identity, our own national identity, the different countries. That I kind of see, right? But other things that post-colonialism claim to be the impact of colonialism until this time, no, I disagree with that. And it also, I mean, post-colonialism serves as a way to create this attitude of being self-defeatist, right? Or defeatist in the sense that, you know, we can't, whatever we think is a Western value, we think of it as a colonialist value. Even enlightenment values are colonialist values. And that goes to say that as a people, we're not even capable of reaching that conclusion. What does that say about us, right?
Yeah. I hate that.
It's awful. It's absolutely awful. And this is why I don't refer to Enlightenment values as Western values, despite the fact that the West contributed largely to their development, right? But they are humanist values. I refuse to refer to them as Western values.
Mm-hmm. So, Izzy, are you currently based in Jordan?
Yes. Yeah.
So how much has post-colonial theory and critical racial theory kind of how much is it around in Jordan at the moment? Is it being used?
Race theory is not so much. I mean, we're more or less a homogeneous society, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, post-colonialism definitely, we're still talking not on an intellectual level, on the layman level, let's say, we're still blaming imperialism for a lot of things. So for example, and I had mentioned that a lot in many of my posts on social media, if I talk about, why are we regressive when it comes to women issues, they say, well, it's because of imperialism. But then, and this is where it gets ironic, then I say to them, well, then let's move towards gender equality. And then the answer is, no, this is an imperialist construct, we refuse to take it. Confused. What are you, like, we're either regressive because of imperialism or to spite imperialism. I don't understand. It doesn't go both ways, right?
Yeah. And how difficult is it when you have those conversations there?
Well, here's the thing. On a personal level, it's much easier to talk. There's the human factor. There's the human rapport. We establish that. But generally speaking, it's hard to convince anyone with anything because we're not used to applying critical thinking. We're not used to doubting ourselves. We're not used to self-reflection. So if I hold a mirror to someone, they don't want to see it.
Mm.
Okay, when you said self-reflection, there's something like with the white fragility stuff that like I kind of equate with the Islam. So, you have the three different kinds. Pardon?
No, I didn't say anything.
Okay, but you have the three different kinds of jihad, and the most significant one is the personal jihad, like the jihad, where you look internally at yourself and try to make, like when they talk about white fragility and checking your privilege and all that. And if you read White Fragility, or if you read Ibram Kendi, if you read some of these other things like Good White People and all that crap, it tells you to look inside and look at like how you've been racialized and how you've and I'm like, it's jihad. It's exactly what they're doing, and they want to do it on a societal level. Yeah,
but I would say, so with the concept of personal jihad, they're calling for genuine self-reflection in a way, but nobody actually applies that, right? And there isn't a starting point for this, whereas with white fragility, the starting point is that you have sinned. That's a bit of a difference, but still, I hear you on this. There is a similarity in that sense, that self-reflection that leads to guilting, which is actually a really negative emotion to start from. Yeah, it's observed in both Islam and the woke culture.
Okay.
But it's also more about showing other people that that's what you're doing. It's not necessarily genuinely being kind of aware of the things you get wrong and things that you like in terms of self-reflection. Not that necessarily the kind of whole kind of white fragility type thing, but I do think self-reflection generally is important. But with the woke ideology, I think it's not necessarily about self-reflection and self-improvement in a general way. It's about showing other people how virtuous you are, but in a really, really false way. There's no actual real kind of self-reflection and self-improvement because they're so moralistic. When they're doing stuff like that, they're very patronizing when you don't agree with them, particularly if you're to use their kind of divisive rhetoric. If you're an ethnic minority that disagrees with their very, very woke kind of ideology, that they become really aggressive and they think they have every right to be that aggressive as well, even though they're really woke and think that you as a darky you can't do anything wrong. At the same time, when you disagree with them, then they think they have a responsibility to correct your thinking because that's part of their role. But it's all very fake, they're not really anti-racist because otherwise you would be able to have a differing opinion from them,
and it's fine. It's very performative. It's virtue signaling for sure, and that's a very big similarity to mainstream Islam. Look at me, I am praying. Look at me, I am veiled, and if you're not doing what I'm doing, you're not as good of a Muslim as I am, right? There's that level of judgment, and the same applies for the woke culture for sure. And it's all performative. Like even when it comes to Islam, it's also very performative, very performative. Who cares if you pray or if you wear, if you believe in a God, you believe that God wants justice, like genuine justice, right? And this is what you work for. But what people are doing is all performative crap. No offense to anyone, but it's all performative. So that's another similarity for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, like the self-reflection, like I get self-reflection. You need to be able to look at yourself and see, okay, where am I wrong? But if you look at Islam, or if you look at something like white fragility, it's only under one lens.
Yeah.
And I mean, and that's another thing too. Like, so go back to Al-Ghazali, and it's, okay, the Sufi thing, like only study that which glorifies Islam. So if you come to this stuff, it's like, okay, critical race theory. So you have to look at everything through the lens of race.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at climate change, okay, well, climate change affects people of color more than it does white people. So we have to put a racial lens on climate change. We need climate justice. It's
well, I need data on this. I'm actually an environmentalist. I need data on this. Like even if it was the case, give me data so I can believe it.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, I can see how you can say that, places in Africa, India, where they're burning a lot more fossil fuels, where they're, like there's not as much controls as they are in Western countries. Yes, they're going to be affected more by pollution and climate change.
Of course, yeah.
But you can't just fix Africa. Like you can't just, you have to, like, climate change is a global thing.
Of course, but it also needs to, like, whatever work that needs to be done in any country, it needs to happen from within.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like, I don't want a white savior to come and fix everything for me.
And it's not the white man's fault, is it? You can't say that climate change in India and Africa and those other parts of the world with ethnic minorities is the fault of white men. Like that's retarded.
They would apply the post-colonialist lens to this, and they would say, well, yeah, but colonialism left corrupt systems, as if the corrupt systems, exist like without any personal interest for those corrupt in that system, right? As if there's no personal responsibility of the corrupt leaders in Africa or in the Middle East, or it's all because of imperialism. So they would apply that lens and say, yes, it's the white man's fault because of that imperialist history. They would apply that lens for sure.
And also it gives the leaders of those countries a legitimate kind of way of shirking responsibility for being so corrupt, right?
Of course, yeah.
Like they've had a long time to try and improve those nations. They get a lot of poorer countries get a lot of foreign aid, which is pocketed by the country leaders. It's been happening for forever now, and it's just the perfect way for them to go, well, this isn't actually our fault. The reason why our countries are still a royal mess is because the white man over there, because of the white history, like imperialism, colonialism, rather than and because most people are perhaps a little bit more, I don't know, whether they're gullible or they're quite happy to eat up the kind of crap they're being fed. It's just given them a kind of an out, and given them the perfect excuse for not having improved things in their own nations and taking responsibility, like you said.
Yeah, it's again, as I said, it does more harm than good. We're very much stripped of the concept of agency. We have no agency whatsoever. Everything, like, it's just the white guilt itself is very much, for me, I think it's racist.
Yeah.
I think it's very racist.
Okay, but like here, okay, they're doing that in the United States like crazy. It's coming into Canada as well in some parts. But in the education system, so they want to stop. So for getting it, they want to get rid of like all elite schools, and it's all going to be lottery based. So it's not going to be based on performance or merit. So these are like high. So this was considered the best high school in the United States, and because the population was something like 75 or 80% Asian,
Yeah.
They said it wasn't diverse enough because now they're counting Asians as white.
White, I did.
Yeah, no, just okay. In Washington State, Asians are counted as white when it comes to school. So they're doing the same thing in New York City, but they're also now they're reducing. So if a student of color hands in an assignment late, don't mark them, don't take away marks because they're late. In Oregon, they're teaching kids. This was how for the teachers for math. So getting kids to show their work is white supremacy. Okay. Yeah. No, it's like, so they're lowering the standards, and you know what? They need to, if you want kids to do better in STEM, you want kids to do better in math, fix that. Like I was just speaking to someone recently, and it's something like it's a huge percentage. I don't want to give a number because I'm going to get it wrong, but I want to say like 70% who can't read when they graduate high school. They read at like a 3rd or 4th grade level.
Yeah.
And they're graduating high school. They can't do basic maths. It was 1/3 of, I can't remember what, I think it was New York State. 1/3 of teachers who were teaching maths couldn't do fractions. And now they want to lower the standards because, we want to be more equitable.
So, previously, though, it's interesting because in the past, like they used to mark down kids of color, didn't they? It was much harder previously for older generations to kind of do well in the classroom. And this is stuff that you know we've heard from kind of the previous generations. And it's interesting that they found a way to continue those practices, but by claiming it's progressive. So we're just still gonna keep, like, you know, black and brown kids stupid. We're just going to tell them that we're doing it because we're not racist. But it is a form of racism if you're going to set a lower standard for them.
It's the bigotry of what do you call it?
Low expectations.
Expectations, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But okay, like, so I'm going to go on a little bit of a hyperbole, but I'm not. I don't think I'm going that far. But so in Pakistan, you had an Islamic school system come in 1972. Mm-hmm. At the end of 79, beginning of 80, that's when Iran and Saudi Arabia started pumping money into madrasas. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, very, very ideologically driven. And that's what these schools are. I mean, like, you listen to some of the teacher stuff, you look at some of the teacher training, they want, we want to create student activists. We don't want to teach, we want to create activists. That's what they want.
Yeah.
Now, not everyone who goes to a madrasa joins ISIS or Al-Qaeda. Mm-hmm. Some of those people will join the Muslim Brotherhood. Some of those people will be the conservative Muslims who, you know, like, what is it in the UK? 98% of Muslims think homosexuality should be criminalized. You know, so you're getting kids in the West, or in the United States and in Canada, I don't know about the UK and the rest, but to focus solely on race, to focus solely on gender, to focus solely on these characteristics and that identity. And I mean, just the race thing. The United States is 70% white.
Yeah.
You're going to get white people to focus on race, and you're wondering why white supremacy is rising. I mean, I'm like, you saw what the madrasas can do. Like, yeah. Why do you want to create madrasas? You know, why do you want to create woke madrasas? And I don't want like the Christian schools here. I could talk about some of the schools in the South, like the I guess right-wing ones that play down slavery and Jim Crow. There's all kinds of bullshit on that side too, but now this is becoming entrenched, and that's a scary thing.
Yeah, it is scary. This is the thing, like, I keep thinking about. If you keep telling white people you're bad, and you're guilting them, that's not gonna, I mean, that's not mentally healthy, and it's not gonna sustain itself.
But at some point you're going to crack, right? If somebody keeps telling you you're bad, then at some point you're going to go, all right, fuck it, I'm bad. Yeah. And now watch me be the baddest I can be, right? Because that's been reinforced. It's like they used to say with kids that were told they were stupid. Eventually, those poor bastards start believing. It's the same thing with white people. We've got to stop doing this. You know, if you ask a lot of the people historically that experienced racism, real racism, not the kind of imaginary kind that some of these morons feel like they're experiencing today, they wouldn't have wanted to have been racist to other people. Some were, but genuinely good people would have said, you know what, we just want to live cohesively, happily together. We want to just be a part of the nation that we're living in, and that it's as simple as that. And you know, I spoke to a good friend of mine a few weeks ago. We used to go partying together about a decade ago. And I knew when we were all partying together, race really wasn't an issue, because otherwise we wouldn't have been friends. And it'd been almost a decade since we caught up properly, really. So I asked him, you know, with the new changes, do you find yourself thinking about race and a kind of difference more often? And he said it's kind of being thrusted down his throat. And I found that really sad. You know, we, like, a bunch of us used to go partying together. None of us really cared where anybody was from, and if we talked about our personal lives, it was because, like, when friends talk about it, because stuff was happening in our personal lives and we needed to offload. It was that simple. It wasn't because I wanted to kind of pull myself out and like make a big deal about my identity or vice versa.
Yeah.
But there's outside forces continually feeding this crap into our society, and I think it's causing quite a disruptive fracture now. We're thinking about it more than we ever have done in our families, in our friendship circles, in our society, and it is on the anti-racist and kind of the woke lot.
It is. So that's one of the things with Islam and how it operates. It operates from the idea of guilt, right?
Yeah.
You know, we're guilted into believing, we're guilted into fasting, we're guilted into praying, we're guilted into doing everything. And that the same goes with, you know, this whole woke thing. You're guilted into it.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Like, you know, people are doing things that first are performative, and even if they weren't, they don't believe in it. What kind of impact does that leave?
But okay, like for me, like, I've had this conversation with a couple of people where, you know, they're like, oh, well, it's not the biggest threat. I'm like, no, it's not. You know, there's much bigger threats out there, but it's the biggest impediment to dealing with all those other threats.
Yeah.
So like that BBC presenter that was on with the woman from the Muslim Council in the UK. I mean, she asked a legitimate question. How many women imams are there? And I mean, that backlash should not have happened. There's nothing Islamophobic about that.
Nothing. Islamophobia it's a term used to smear the opposition and rally people for power, you know, just to get the votes, basically. It's not a real thing. Anti-Muslim bigotry, yes, exists, but this is about people.
I have to say, I think the scale of anti-Muslim bigotry is often over-represented in the media. I don't think that the scale of it is what they're claiming it is. Purely because even the Islamophobia definition that they created nationally here, that lots of councils seem to be adopting without consulting anybody, because they're desperately trying to paint themselves as woke as possible. When I read through it, lots of incidents, you kind of felt like you weren't getting A, the full picture, B, sometimes it may have just been a racist incident painted as an Islamophobic incident. Sometimes it might not have even been a racist incident. An argument with a hijabi woman is illustrated as an Islamophobic incident. It could have been started by her. We weren't given all the facts, but it's kind of you know, self-declared Islamophobia. The so-called victim, we don't know anything about these victims, they're reporting themselves that this was an Islamophobic incident. Now, if you go round, and I can say this with ease because I had that kind of frame of mind at one point. I'd grown up in a household where I was told that everything was racist. You're simultaneously told that you are both a victim and also better than everybody as a Pakistani and a Muslim, right? So you're told those two things in conjunction. Then you go out into the world, and anything that happens, you're told it's either because you're Muslim or because you're racist. right? And they don't get you because you're better than everybody else. So you're told all of those three things together. So when something happens, you instantly label it either Islamophobic or racist. And actually, as an adult, having taken quite a few steps back from everything, I've realized sometimes we put those interpretations onto things. People are allowed to dislike you, right? There's loads of people I take an instant disliking to. We've started pretending that humans don't judge each other, right? Which is bullshit. How many times have you met somebody and they might be a really nice person and you know you're a douche for not liking them, but you just don't, because
that's the thing,
right?
Yeah.
But we're now starting to label these things as Islamophobic and racist, and often they're not. It's just unless you've got categoric proof that it's racist or Islamophobic, you cannot label those things.
With intersectionality and identity politics, the due process no longer exists.
Yes, this is true.
You can't question a narrative of a supposed victim. If you do, you're racist.
Yeah, but this has come out of feminism as well, though, because I was on a call the other day. Sorry, Abed. We're not really giving you a chance, are we? We're women.
Or makes my job easier.
I was on a call the other day with Abed. This will make you laugh. So this woman has done some fantastic work, right, around domestic homicides. And there was a complaint about how the media doesn't report cases of domestic homicide properly. There's biased reporting and all of these kinds of things. And I was like, there's a simple solution to this, because I read all of the judiciary kind of sentencing stuff that comes out of the judiciary here. I get the alerts just because they're interesting, right? And I said, like, if reporters don't feel like they can keep their opinions to themselves, they are supposed to kind of serve as public servants in some ways and provide information, right? So what we could ask is that they just report the facts from cases. This happened, this is what we know, and keep your opinions to yourself. Like, if you are going to muddy an article with kind of quite grotesque opinions about what you think was happening in the relationship, but you don't have the facts, perhaps keep that to yourself. Maybe that could be a solution. It was just a suggestion to kind of like throw ideas out there. And then from that, from like multiple articles having seen multiple sentences, you could kind of draw patterns, right? This is what happens in most domestic homicide cases. This is what we know from having seen 100, 200, whatever. So that was my suggestion. And the woman kind of bit my head off. She was like, Sadia, there's no such thing as facts, because, you know, it's my interpretation of facts or your interpretation of facts. And I was like, you've just made a complaint. I've given you a solution. You're not adopting that solution because you're so goddamn woke. Maybe you're the problem now, because you have a complaint, but you're also part of the problem.
There are, you know, like they say there's no such things like facts, and then they complain when Trump and what's her name, Conway, said alternative facts, right? Like,
but that's just it. It's all hypocrisy. But like when you were talking about the, you know, only certain people can speak, but okay, but it's, again, like this is a little, maybe it's a little silly, but it's only the right minorities can speak. So I mean, you had, you know, Biden say during the last election, if you don't vote for Joe Biden, you ain't black. And then, I mean, you had people talking about, you know, being politically black, and are you really black, this and that. So I mean, that's like, okay, well, those are the Ahmadis. They're not really Muslim. You know, those are Shia. We're Sunni. There's, you know, like whatever. It's like that's what it is. You're deciding who is authentically.
If you're whatever. If they're not serving the narrative, the preferred narrative, they're out of the picture.
And you can call them. You can call them the most horrific. Like this is one of the things that I see. And I mean, if you, in the United States, if you take a look at like black conservatives, you can go back a while and you'll get the same kind of criticisms. But if you have like you know, okay, with the ex-Muslims or with Reform Muslims, I mean, they were called, you know, they call them the most vile things, like, and you know, like you guys should know, like with women, like rape threats on top of like the racial slurs. I mean, calling them house Muslims, calling them Uncle Toms, you know, porch monkeys, coconuts, bounty bars, all this crap. And it's the same thing with, you know, black people who aren't drinking the Kool-Aid of like critical race theory.
But the same thing's now happening with ex-Muslims, which I don't really like that term, but those that now don't believe, like former Muslims, right, who don't have the right political alliances, they're now, when they say exactly the same thing as left-wing former Muslims, their opinions aren't considered valid enough. You know, I've heard the, oh, isn't she a bit right-wing type?
Yeah.
That kind of response,
God, I hate
legitimizing their opinion when actually they're both saying exactly the same thing. I have to say, for me personally, even if somebody who's genuinely far right, and I think they're quite few in numbers actually, because being an actual racist in this day and age is the worst thing you can be, right? Like you have no social capital there, and I think in numbers they're actually very small, right? But I don't mind them if they're gonna be racist, if they're gonna be Islamophobic, fucking come at me, mate. Like I'm quite comfortable. You speak, and then I'll have my say too. I don't think that we have any right to shut them down, because I think all it does is it creates this underground movement that's really, really toxic, and when that blows, the impact is much, much more frightening.
And the thing is, with the whole treatment with the right wing, yeah, probably, as you said, some of them might be racist. I think it's a very small minority, right? But even if those racists are coming out and saying something like, well, Islam promotes misogyny, you don't question the statement.
No.
You question the motives of the person who's making it, if they were racist, right? But you don't question the statement itself. You don't shut it down. You don't eliminate it. But that's what they do. That's exactly what they do.
But another thing with this, like with the right wing thing and all that. Now, I noticed this with the Islam debate. Some right wingers, so people like Robert Spencer from Jihad Watch, and I'm trying to remember the woman's name in the UK, Anne Marie Waters, I think it was. Okay. They actually read the Quran and the Hadith. Right?
Yeah.
And they knew what they were talking about. A lot of left-wing people didn't read it, and they would say things like, well, my friend Fatima says the hijab is a choice. You know, my friend Muhammad says Islam is a religion of peace. Yeah. And so when the right wingers said this stuff, okay, that became right-wing talking points. It's the same thing happening now. It's like, oh, you're encouraging the far right. You're giving fodder to the far right. But it's like, assholes, you're not talking about it. You're not bringing this stuff up.
Exactly.
You're ceding the space to these nut bars. And that's why something like Taqiyya became so prominent. I hadn't heard of Taqiyya until I was like 2015. That was when I first heard about it. And when I first heard it, I thought it was the Urdu word taqiyya. And I'm like, what the hell do pillows have to do with this one? You know, like, and so like, and so anytime after that, when I heard someone bring up Taqiyya, I'm like, okay, that's a red flag. You're not a serious person.
Yeah.
But it's ridiculous.
But the reason those more either conservative or far right people do genuinely end up doing more research is because they have to over prepare, where they're being kind of prevented from speaking. They're like, well, I need to prove my point now, right? That usually is the case. That's why the opposition doesn't need to prepare, because they feel like they're completely, they've got the right opinion, whereas those guys have got the wrong opinion. So those that are constantly told that they've got the wrong opinion do go and over prepare, do go and do the research and find all the kind of, quotations to back up what they're saying. They are effectively kind of, if there is a growing far right movement, it's because that they're facilitating that.
No, but I mean, like, but it's the same thing now. Like, I mean, I see, because I'm following a lot of the culture war stuff, and it's just, I'll see like Glenn Lowry talk about that. Oh, we're told that we're enabling the far right. It's like, but have like decent, have some decent arguments. Like, let other people talk. Like, be it race or Islam, I mean, you should be able to have the discussion of crime in black communities.
Yeah, of course.
But if you bring that up, it's like, no, you're a racist now.
Racist,
You're enabling the far right. You're giving, but at the same time, the far right will say, like someone who's truly racist, oh, black people are lazy, whatever.
Yeah.
But now you have school systems saying, well, if black kids come in later, they hand their work in late. Well, that's just cultural.
Yeah.
What exactly are you saying then?
But that's really offensive, isn't it? Because some of these communities, some of these ethnic minorities have been in Britain, for example. If we like, I can't speak about other nations because this is the nation I know most about. But in Britain, for example, some of the ethnic minorities have been here for 4, 5. They're creating 5th and 6th generation children. If you think that after having been here for 5 or 6 generations, they culturally haven't integrated enough to be able to hand their work in on time, then you still think, and this is, I place this allegation at the woke feet completely, then you are racist because you think that these people are still other. You still think that they're not integrated into your society, and you don't feel like they deserve to be integrated either if you're going to treat them differently, right?
Actually, I've had a personal experience with this kind of thing. When I studied in Sweden, I did my master's degree there. We came from, like, the students in the program came from different parts of the world, so they did this course called cross-cultural communication course, which was well intended, right? Because we're coming from different cultures, there are certain differences that we need to understand. And in the course, they talk about the different stereotypes for the different cultures. And of course, the stereotype for Arabs is that we're always late. Now, here's the thing with stereotypes: 60 to 70% of the times they're true. They don't come from thin air, right? But the thing is, the idea was, when those stereotypes were presented, was for us to actually, not apply them, treat people as individuals, right? Be mindful that this can happen in that culture, but treat people as individuals. But what happened with me was, basically, whenever I'm in a group setting where I'm doing a part of a group assignment, the other students from Western cultures would come to me and say, it's all right if you are late, we understand. And I'm like, I've never even given you an excuse for you to actually say that to me. I've always been on time, or even before time, and even if I was late, I want you to hold me to the same standard. Otherwise, I'm not going to learn. I'm not
exactly.
I'm not going to progress. Holding me to this lower standard, that's covertly racist. I don't want this. I didn't ask for this. And this is what's happening right now with the whole school thing, as Hameed mentioned, and many other issues. They're applying a different standard, a lower standard, which is racist.
Yeah, of course.
Racist.
No, but okay, like, again, the first thing I noticed when I got back to Canada was the blasphemy laws. It's like, as soon as I said it, I'm like, you people are, it's secular blasphemy laws, and they're growing now. And you can't say this. I mean, okay, so the guy worked for the New York Times for 47 years. He was their science editor. He was asked about a student, like, he was on some student trip, and he was asked about a student who had said the N-word, like, when she was 12. And he actually said, whatever, I'm going to say it. I'm not, you can't talk about the word without saying it. Like, he said the word nigger, and he said, like, did she say it when she was, did she say it when she was singing or whatever? And he was forced to resign.
Yeah.
I mean, so you can't even talk about it. So if I want to talk about Huck Finn, or, I mean, there's a guy named Dick Gregory, his biography is the word. Like, so if I want to talk about that, or if you want to talk about James Baldwin, or if you want to talk about any of this stuff, like,
they're saying, they're saying intent doesn't matter. And that is, I mean, how, again, it's really a bizarro world we're living in. Like, we're all guilty until proven innocent. It's not the other way around.
Yeah.
Which is
a mad world.
Yeah. But it's I mean, it's not just that. It's like, intent doesn't matter. That part's all crazy. But it's like, if you if you do something by mistake and you commit a sin, well, the sin's still on you, right? So it doesn't matter what your intent was.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
another
yeah.
point.
It's like you're. I mean, but there's no salvation. Like no matter what you do,
There's-
there's if you're a guy, there's no 7 days. Go ahead.
No, you're done. No matter
Yeah.
what you do, you're done. And people issue apologies, and I feel like, oh my God, it's kind of like a confession under, how do you say it? Coercion, right?
Yeah.
It's what is this? How is that actually right? How is that actually genuine? Even if the guy or the person made a genuine mistake, you're forcing them to apologize. They don't mean it.
And it's no, but it's just like absolute cruelty. And I
It
mean,
is. It is definitely. It's crazy. It's really crazy, and really, again, it's bringing a lot of harm. Especially with the whole Islamophobia issue. And I wrote an article which hopefully would be published soon with how do you say it? Ario.
area, yeah.
Ario, yeah. About the whole danger of Islamophobia. They're saying Islam is beyond. They're saying Islam is beyond reform. That's what they're saying, right? And we're stuck in the same regressive pattern, which will actually feed the actual racists, because they're going to say, "Look at them; they can't even reform," right?
Mm-hmm. But it's also, I mean, like when you were saying, the universal values, like instead of enlightenment values, and totally, like I don't like the term Western values, but so if you read like some of the critical race theorists and all that, they say that this is not, these are white values. This is whiteness. This is all, like all that stuff is whiteness.
It's crazy.
But I mean, like, but you're also feeding into that. I mean, there's an organization, Ideas Beyond Borders.
Yeah.
And they like what they're doing, and what Faisal's doing there, and the search for knowledge. Like I think he told me in the first day when he put out calls for translators, he got 15,000 people from Iraq and said they wanted to translate for him. But that, like, I mean, if you can make that link for people in the Middle East, like especially Persians and North Africans, and say, you know what, the ideas from the Enlightenment, they came from Baghdad. They came from Persians and North Africans. Like if it wasn't for Averroes and Avicenna, and if it wasn't for Ibn Khaldun and all these people,
definitely,
it wouldn't have gotten into Europe. These are like, fine, you can read these people now and say, okay, they're a little archaic, but it's 1,000 years ago. But they had, like, those ideas were there. These are there. And they belong to us.
My experience with Islam was extremely peculiar, because I was raised with a very rational Islamic school of thought called Mu'tazila, and they were very much enlightened. Really enlightened. For them, for example, the first act of accountability for a human being is to question the existence of God. This is your starting point. You question the existence of God. They apply reason, right? Of course, for them, they think God exists, but they're not demonizing those that say God doesn't exist, right? This is what their reasoning got them to, and that happened. This Islamic school of thought was dominating for some time of the Abbasid period, and this is also in the same time that science and philosophy and art actually prospered, because they also believed in the free will of the people, right? So to say that it's just these concepts are Western, that's a misrepresentation of reality.
Okay, mention Mu'tazilite. I'm not sure if he was Mu'tazilite or not, but it was around the same time. Ibn al-Haytham. Okay, this is one of his quotes, and he said, "The seeker after the truth is not one who studies the writings of the ancients and follows his natural disposition, but puts his trust in them. But rather the one who suspects his faith in them and questions what he gathers from them, and the one who submits to argument and demonstrations and not sayings of the human beings." I mean, okay, this is John Stuart Mill. Like, this was written in about between 800 and 1000. John Stuart Mill wrote, he that only knows his side of the argument knows little of that. And that he goes on to say that you have to go look for the best version of that argument. You have to find, it's the exact same thing.
It is, and like I would say, for example, Thomas Paine was talking about how the script is not really, well, basically that's the script is not the arbiter of right and wrong, right? And the same with Mu'tazila, they were saying exactly the same, right? But times apart and places apart, and this goes to show that we are all human beings. If we apply reason, we probably would reach the same conclusions.
So the conflict between the Mutazilites and, say, the more conservative schools of thought in Islam, how is that kind of, or is it even a discussion taking place within places like Jordan now? Because I mean, I don't think in like the Anglosphere there is any understanding of like the various Islamic sects, including Sufism. Sufism something that's very close to my heart because of the skepticism, like, rooted in it. Do you think there's any understanding of it, or do you think that they just see it as like one homogenous, Iranian, Saudi style kind of ideology?
Right now, the understanding of Islam abroad, let's say in the West, is more or less monolithic. But I mean, there is a mainstream Islam, right? There is definitely a mainstream Islamist ideology, and actually many that are Islamist in nature. Mu'tazila, my late father was trying to bring it back, right? And he faced a lot of persecution, for that. But nobody knows about, like, very few people in the world, unless you actually study Islamic studies, you're not going to know about it. You're not going to know about its existence, right?
Okay.
But something you said that's really important. Sorry, Abid. Something that you said that's very important is that the kind of mainstream Islam is more Islamist ilk. And the kind of the Islamist bent. I think that's a really crucial point, because I don't think a lot of people would admit to that.
No, of course not. No.
That it is that it's not just conservative, because I make the distinction between conservative and the more kind of Islamist ilk, right? Because I think the difference is those that have those ideas and keep it to themselves, and those that think the state ought to kind of transform to kind of represent their mad version of Islam. Like that is kind of like quite a clear distinction. And I think, Ubaid, me and you have talked about how the fracture of fundamentalist, Islamist, and jihadist isn't useful. I just kind of think fundamentalist and conservative is useful.
But I mean, like that whole thing too. I mean, like I didn't. Okay, so my family's Sunni. I was born in India, grew up in Canada. I didn't know anything about Hanafi, all of that stuff. I didn't know about any of like the different madhabs. I didn't hear about Shia Sunni until like the early '80s, and like when you had the first Intifada. I was like, because to me, it was Muslim, and then then I started hearing about, obviously, I guess the first Intifada I was about 11 as well too, but coming from a Sunni background, we didn't have to talk about Sunni Shia so much. Also, we were in Canada, but no one really knows about that. But like even like the Mutazilites, no one knows. Okay, they talk about, like, people talk about the golden age of Islam. And it's like, okay, fine, you talk about the golden age, but what do you really mean? It's like, okay, oh well, the Arab. I'm like, no, they weren't Arabs. First of all, they were mainly, like I said, Persians and North Africans. But I mean, in that golden age, you had two different streams of thought. You had the stream of thought that was enlightened, and then you had the stream of thought like that, the Al-Ghazali, and Ibn Hisham version, like very, very strict. And I mean, Al-Ghazali made it into Europe as well. Thomas Aquinas liked Al-Ghazali, and he used Al-Ghazali's writings to figure out how to burn witches at the stake and how to burn heretics at the stake. I mean, this was thought that came in from everywhere. So we've got it, but people like, the golden age of Islam. It's like, Jesus Christ, at least, that's what I like. Like a lot of this stuff, they don't want to talk about two sides. It's either one is all bad, one is all good. Like I keep saying, like they can't see the victims for the brown people. They can't. Like it's just, you need to have a balanced approach. Like, yes, there's good things that came out of the golden age, but there was also bad things. Let's talk about it.
No, definitely. I mean, here's the thing. One thing people don't seem to understand also when it comes to Islam is the rise of Islamism is actually political, and they like, because Islamism actually denies the existence of free will. That bodes well with dictators. It bodes really well with dictators. Any other rationalist view of Islam is not going to be accepted on a state level, right? It's going to be persecuted. But like with the golden age of Islam, what I wanted to say, God, you don't know how much we talk about it here, and we like, oh, the golden age of, and it's so romanticized, and like we don't even think of, okay, so what was good there that we don't have right now? Let's apply that. We just sing praises of that time, and we don't even try to bring it back, although I don't know if we can bring it back. We need to sort of restart the whole process, but this is all we do. The golden age, oh, we were perfect, we were great, and not even that. Like now there's a whole issue of supremacy in Islam, like we do.
I think some of these things existed, they've existed for a really, really long time. This kind of Islamic supremacy, I've heard it all my life, that Muslims are better.
I
think some of the political elements of Islam as well, I think they've existed for a really, really long time, since its infancy even.
Definitely. I mean,
and I think people are ignorant of stuff like that I think in the kind of Anglosphere in Europe, they are kind of ignorant of how old these ideas are within Islam. This isn't something new. Jihad isn't something new. It's been around since its infancy. And I'm not sure why they fail to kind of engage with some of the stuff that we tell them.
But okay, I want to. One of the things with like the whole racism stuff. So right after George Floyd got killed, saw it from a lot of ex-Muslim groups and all these people, and then like South Asian groups and stuff like that. Oh, we have to look at the anti-blackness in our communities. It's like, what? Screw you. There were people, there were ex-Muslims, there were reform Muslims who were talking about slavery and Islam and got shot down by. We're told we were saying right-wing talking points. Oh my God, you're only speaking on Fox and all this other bullshit. And now all of a sudden, because the police commit a horrific act, we have to look at the anti-blackness in our communities. I'm like, no, there are some of us who've already dealt with it and tried to deal with it, but we were told by you racist assholes that we were being white supremacist.
Exactly.
And it's like, like that hypocrisy really pisses me off. And it's, there is. I mean, there was a conference in Toronto last July about brown complicity and white supremacy. How brown people are complicit in white supremacy because brown people are taking jobs and they're letting white people say, see, we're not racist. We have brown folk working for us. And I mean, like, it's just so ludicrous. And these are the assholes.
The last job interview I had, I said exactly that to my boss. I said, look, if you hire me, you ain't going to need to hire a black person. It gives you a brown person, I actually said exactly that. And she was like, great work, Sadia. We are not going to have to hire a black person. I'm joking before people
or whatever. But,
as if that's a fucking conversation that we're going to have. We'll never work again, right?
Yeah.
Oh, but
retarded.
No, the thing is, right now, it pays to be a victim.
Yeah.
It pays to be a victim. And like now, even with, like I've been applying for postgraduate studies, and as much as I hate this, I feel like I have to play the identity card because this is what the admissions are looking into. It's not so much about my merit, and you have merit, right?
But I mean that's just ridiculous. I mean, like lowering of the standards, and they did it in the UK and they did in Australia. I think in the UK they gave women 15 extra minutes to do some finals, like final exams. And in Australia, they lowered the entrance requirements for women in engineering.
I can't.
And this is this is to be less
So
sexist.
this is where the crossover, where, like you said, between woke and Islam actually occurs, right? Because we know Muhammad thought women were deficient.
Yeah.
So this is exactly what they're doing. They're treating us like we're deficient. We need more time to do our work. You know, like.
No, but okay. But it's also like, you know, WASP, like the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, right? Like women are inferior, the delicate sex can't handle the logic and the reason, blah blah blah, mathematics. But okay, just with the gender stuff for a second, because I've seen this a little bit in the United States, like very very small amount in, like, you know, fundamentalist Christian spheres, but Iran and Pakistan. So if you're gay and, you know, they'll give you a choice, and they catch you, they'll give you a choice of one of the couple transitioning to the opposite sex.
Yeah.
So they force the transition surgery. Yeah. Pakistan started doing this recently, and then like Code Pink and Pink News celebrated Pakistan for doing it. Look how progressive they are. Look how trans friendly.
They're fucking retarded.
Okay,
Pink News is a retarded outlet.
But there are now, I've heard about this, like I said, very very small amount, hardcore fundamental Christians in the United States. With the whole trans thing, they're like, okay, well then if my child can transition, they're no longer gay. They're just, you know, so it's pushing, like, and hey, if someone wants to be trans, like, again, like, you know, when you bring this up, it's like, oh my God, you're trans. I'm like, more power to you. But I don't want children. I don't want to have it done to children like that. That's a hill I'll die on. Like, no, sorry, you don't do surgery like that or give hormone blockers to children. But when parents can decide that for a child now and say, well, now my child is going to transition and they're no longer homosexual. They're like, you know, they're a gay man.
This is something that started pissing. It was one of the reasons actually why I started moving out of the atheist world, right? Because I was very, very concerned about this. You know, Iran for a long time had the highest number of sex changes in the world, not because it's a wonderfully you know, homosexual friendly country. It's because they are massively fucking homophobic. They hang them on cranes. They're not LGBT friendly, mate.
No.
I was kind of hysterical about this for a really long time. And in the atheist sphere, what really started getting me quite angry actually was, on the one hand, they were kicking off that you know, we don't like fantasy, we don't care about your we care about facts, not your feelings. And simultaneously these retards were denying the fact that a man in a dress is not a woman, right? They're feeding that fantasy and kind of denying the reality of what's happening in Iran and Pakistan. So, how can you take somebody like that seriously? There's a disconnect there that they can't even kind of, it just didn't make sense.
Here's what I see happening. The woke are actually working to enshrine everything they're set out to fight against, you know?
Oh, totally.
Everything. It's race, gender, everything. They're bringing us, they're taking us back. We're regressing.
No, but okay, but like I don't know about, I don't want to say about Islam. I only have a couple of things, but with Christianity. So this stuff started coming into evangelical Christianity in the 90s. So postmodernism started coming in. Like, I've been speaking to a couple of people when they're talking about this, and but now there's a real schism in the church where there are actually woke churches, and it's also coming into like Catholicism. They're having a little bit of a schism, and then I see people like Mona El-Tawi. And you know, and I'm like, yeah, Mona, you've lost the plot. Like, you know,
she's gone crazy, hasn't she? I've kind of been watching her over the last couple of years, slowly, publicly going mad.
But okay, but do you think, like, when you said like, oh, the woke are bringing back a lot of this stuff now, you know, so critical race theory, it's anti-racist, you know, gender theory, queer theory, you don't want to be transphobic, homophobic, okay, whatever. So, I mean, no, I'm not going to deny Islam, Christianity, Judaism, they're, you know, misogynistic, homophobic, like the whole thing, like divisive. But because this stuff is so on the surface, it says we fight all these things. And a lot of these, you know, in the States, it started in like 10 years ago in high schools, but, you know, a lot of, you know, like late high school or going to college, you come across these ideas. Now, these might be kids who were raised in fundamentalist households, or even like, you know, not strict Muslim, but stricter than even conservative Christian households. So they haven't had a lot of exposure to stuff. They come to this stuff in college.
Yeah.
Or they come to this stuff in high school.
Yeah.
And they're like, it's the opposite. So they're just leaving Islam. They think they're leaving Islam, whatever, all behind. But they're just going to this new way of thinking. Like, I think this is why it got into atheism so quickly around 2010, 2011, when the Atheism Plus started. This is when this stuff came in. And like, because it is so, on the surface, it sounds like, who doesn't want to be anti-racist? You know, like, let's stop homophobia. Let's stop transphobia. But it's not.
In my opinion, though, Abed, look, what I believe is happening is very difficult, and I guess I'm personalizing a little bit, so do forgive me for that. I do think it's very difficult to go from one ideology to nothing. I do think that that's a very difficult transition to make, you know, particularly when you've grown up with the crutch of that faith. So, and I personally, reflecting back, think that the atheist sphere is very, very dogmatic. So even going from Islam to the atheist sphere, you are going to a very, very dogmatic sort of community. But the woke ideology really fills that gap of, you know, going from extreme kind of religious, authoritarian, controlling ideology to an idea, a set of ideas that says, well, nothing's true. You can be whatever you want to be, and like there's no truth or whatever. It's replacing one ideology with another ideology that prevents you from thinking for yourself. Because, like you said, right, you can't really go against the woke ideas without kind of ending up in woke prison, right? I don't know. What do you guys think of that?
Okay, the ideology thing. I've been talking about this a little bit, and I equate it to a garden. And I said, like, this is part of the problem is, and I've said it, and you'll hear a lot of people say it. Okay, you know, free speech is the foundation of all our other values. So these are our foundational values. I'm like, no, you know what? They're not a foundation. You need those first principles, but the way you think about your first principles, don't think about them as a foundation, because then you end up with what you have in the United States. Oh, well, we've got the First Amendment, so free speech is a law, and if the government doesn't attack your free speech rights aren't being taken away. No, you've forgotten where that foundation is. Like I think this was a problem with a lot of the atheist stuff. They told you to stop believing in this crap, but they didn't show you a better way of thinking.
Yes,
like they just said, true. Oh, think critically. They didn't show you what that meant. Like they taught, like,
it was sloganeering, wasn't it?
Yeah,
rather than saying, it was like you replaced one slogan, the kind of religious sloganeering, with atheist sloganeering, but with no real kind of support of, okay, what is critical thinking? How do we do it? What does it entail? What questions am I supposed to be asking? Am I asking the right questions? Am I kind of am I analyzing things, or am I, are my biases impacting how I'm exploring these things? All of those things. The atheist world was a real big letdown in many ways, because it was just more sloganeering from coming, like like you said, it was just to me it felt just as dogmatic in many ways. They weren't religious, but it was a new kind of belief system, effectively. And I found so I was doing some monitoring. I don't know if you saw, I tweeted about this recently because I found it particularly interesting. I was doing some monitoring reporting for an organization, and they collect figures. Part of the reason they do this is because we're commissioned to support everybody in county, and if there's one demographic that's not using the service and we know it's an issue within that demographic, we need to know. And in this organization's kind of remit, it's important to know if they're not using the service. So usually I don't necessarily like that figure collecting, but it's useful in this sphere. And there were two categories I noticed in the religion section. One was atheism and one was no belief. And I kind of reflected on that afterwards, and I thought, when I was part of the atheist sphere, I would have categorically went for atheist. Now I would intentionally tick no belief, because I don't have any belief system, and I wonder if atheism itself has become a belief system, and within that if you are atheist and part of the atheist sphere, that with that comes a certain kind of politics.
See,
I think, sorry,
no,
with atheism, well, it's also not a monolith. There are different, different strains of atheists, right? And there are the militant ones. There are the more, liberal ones, let's say. I think there is maybe atheism is the belief that there is no God, maybe, but I don't think there's a system built around that.
I think if you think about just the definition, it just means that you don't believe in God, right? It's that simple. You don't have a belief system. But I think what the new atheism, I think what you call atheism plus, that kind of movement has made it very, very dogmatic. So much so that even people that would have previously just said I'm atheist without it having any kind of baggage along with it, have distanced from it because of the kind of the baggage that now comes with that label. But my concern more so is that it too adopted the woke kind of dogma at the same time, making it doubly difficult if you just kind of wanted to be a skeptic or a critical thinker, and you wanted to criticize particularly Islam. Sorry, Abed.
No, but I was going to say, like, okay, like with what Izzy said, like, it's atheism. No, it's not a belief system per se, but there is like that atheism plus, especially. And I think this is more of a Western thing than it is anything else. It's like I don't think you'd see this much in the Middle East, but it's that. Okay, it is that woke stuff that came into it, that atheism plus, where you have to be and then they started using just about every humanist organization I know in North America pushes the equity thing, and you have bigger people in the atheist community like Matt Dillahunty and Hameed Mehta, whatever, these morons who say J.K. Rowling is transphobic and blah blah blah, like that kind of crap. So if you're inclined, if you're predispositioned to believe something in the first place, and then you go into school or whatever, you get this other stuff, which is basically the woke stuff is another belief system. I'd like to read John McWhorter's new book that's coming out about it, but and so if they believe that and they're going into it, so there is a segment of atheist people who like that atheism plus or whatever, who subscribe to that nonsense, and that it's not atheism per se, it's that stuff is a belief. So these people who call themselves atheists have a new belief structure, but they don't believe in God and they don't believe in heaven or hell. So in that sense, I guess they're technically atheists, but whatever. And
I think there's something in that, right? Like you said, you're not taught critical thinking when you enter that kind of sphere. And if you've grown up in a community where, you were kind of entrenched in a belief system, then you do need some hand-holding in how to think critically. Because it's not something that comes naturally to you, particularly if you were scolded for asking questions as a kid, which a lot of Muslims report, a lot of former Muslims reported after having left the faith, that there was a backlash for asking questions, for being inquisitive. Then they need a bit of hand-holding to be able to think for themselves. Otherwise, they are going to fall for dogma after dogma after dogma, and it is going to be painful when they realize every single time that they've been duped again. There's a bit of shame there. I kind of feel that a little bit about the atheist sphere. I wasn't thinking for myself when I was in the atheist sphere. I was just kind of following the new gods that I'd replaced with the old gods that I believed, right?
Yeah. Okay, I want to ask you that, Izzy, but during the early 2000s and up until about, I guess, 2014, 15, when in the West anyways, it splintered off into critical race theory and all that. How was the atheist movement in the West? How was it viewed upon by people in Jordan? Because I mean, you had people being killed on the steps of courthouses for drawing a cartoon and stuff, right? I mean,
we had a a journalist, actually, an atheist journalist, killed
Mm.
on the way to a court hearing where he was supposed to be charged with blasphemy charge. I'm sorry. The question is,
Like how was that atheist community or atheist movement in the West? How was that viewed in Jordan? Like what do they think about that? Or
they don't. I mean, my work with atheists here, I think they haven't gotten to the point where there's atheism plus. Where that's one thing I kind of find hope in the Middle East, aside from post-colonialism as a a layman thing going on. We're not really um, uh, catching up to all that kind of thing with CRT and identity politics, and we're not there yet. So when it comes to atheism, it's either driven by an allegiance to the Communist Party, or it's driven by a trauma with religion.
Right. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, I gotta ask this though, because not a lot of people know about this. I don't know how much you know, but the connection between communism and Islam. I mean, South Yemen was communist. Iran had a communist faction.
Yeah.
Syria and Libya were allies with the Soviet Union. Like in the Cold War. Like, what
proxy? We were using proxy.
Yeah. So, like, how does communism fit in with Islam?
Well, communism. So there are parts. So when we talk about how communism sort of came into the Arab world, it's really politically driven. You don't have to have how do you say it, similarities or synergies between two. It's really about armament or having arms from the Soviet Union. It was really about that. But if we talk on the ideology level, the socialist part of it, Islam is like the economic system in Islam is largely socialist. It's a mix of two things really, but there's a socialist aspect to it, right? Which makes it easier to adopt communism economically.
Yeah.
But when it comes to how communism treats the concept of God, that's all, of course, problematic, and it causes a lot of conflict, right? But nobody talks about this because it's politically driven, because Islamic sects or militias are getting arms from the Soviet Union. They're not going to question it. They're not going to attack it per se.
Yeah, I mean, like, did some of the communism? They talk about the universalism. Everyone's the same. We're all you're all comrades. Blah blah blah. Like, so you can play that off. You're all Muslim, even though they'll say a bead to black people and like like that kind of stuff.
Brothers and sisters. That's what we are. That aspect. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, that's how it is with atheism. Like, from my observation, it's either because of allegiance to the Communist Party, which is actually, now regressing a lot. It was a thing when the Soviet Union existed, but now it's not anymore. But the other part is more of a trauma with Islam and just wanting to break up.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is, I think for me, that's even, like, I get scared of politically driven, atheism, which comes with the taste of Marxism and communism, right?
Yeah. No, I politically driven anything. Like, I think we need to get politics out of as much as possible. Like,
yeah, exactly. I completely agree on this. But yeah, I don't know. Like, there are polls that claim that young Arab men and women are actually moving away from religion, and it is, but nobody actually says it out loud, and that tells you how cultish it can be.
Yeah.
Which is the walk.
But okay, one thing because I mentioned this the other day. It's like, I've been seeing this a lot now. They're saying, white fragility isn't really critical race theory. Ibram Kendi isn't really critical race theory. And it sounds like, when the way they're talking about it, it sounds a lot like a Quranist speaking about the Hadith. Oh, well, that's not really Islam, right? Like it's not.
Yeah.
No, because they're trying to distance themselves because Kendi's getting a lot of flack.
Yeah.
White fragility got a lot of flack last year. And so they're trying to bring critical race theory back to, it's just a legal interpretation. It's like, yeah, screw you. Like the book Critical Race Theory and Introduction by Delgado says it is a political viewpoint and it's a political ideology that you must uphold or whatever. I can't remember the quote, but and it's like I said, it's the same kind of defenses. It's the same kind of, oh, well, that's not, it's only the Quran that's part of Islam. It's not the Hadith. It's the same kind of attacks and stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is, definitely. I mean, that's the thing when you don't believe in the objective truth. That's what happens.
Yeah. Anyone can do anything they want.
Exactly.
But again, I read too much of this stuff, but if you read Foucault and you go back to some of the stuff he says, for him, it wasn't that there is no objective truth. So so science and the postmodernists would say, you'll never know the objective truth because you even in science,
it changes.
Yeah. But you can agree upon it and you can come to an agreed upon objective reality that, when Einstein said, I'd like to think the moon is still there, even though I'm not looking, right? So we know, gravity moves at 9.8 meters per second, but that's at sea level. And if you go up, that, but we have that stuff. Whereas the postmoderns say that it doesn't matter what the truth is. Truth doesn't last. So if there's a culture out there that says that the sun goes around the earth, not the other way around, if you tell them that's not objectively true, or you try to break that reality from them, you're oppressing them because that's their reality.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the way they look at it. It's really screwed up.
The lived experience. We focus so much on that, and I mean, lived experiences are so subjective. Yes. They're very subjective. So how can you rely on that? Right? But yeah, I hear you on this. But still, I think with correct me if I'm wrong, but with CRT, the idea of objectivity is denied.
Okay, objectivity is whiteness. Okay, so as best as I can tell, because you'll hear stuff like, white people have been suppressing or oppressing black people from the dawn of time. Okay, so which is bullshit. Black people were around first. Humans came out in Africa.
Exactly.
But anyways, they look at the Enlightenment, so pre-Enlightenment. This is okay. So I'm going to use it in the Abrahamic sense, but more in the Christian sense. But it was so humans lived together. You all have different ways of knowing. So, in the Garden of Eden, before they ate the apple, animals were around, and no one molested each other. Humans were vegetarians. The lions didn't kill the deers, and all this other bullshit. Right? It was all happy go lucky. So we all had our ways of knowing. We were all happy. Then the Enlightenment happened. And that was a white way of knowing. And because of the Enlightenment, that gave power to the science, and objectivity gave power to the white man. They could colonize everyone. They could take it all over. So that's when whiteness came into the world. And so they want to disrupt and dismantle the system of whiteness and white supremacy. So to realistically do that, what they mean is they have to get rid of objectivity, worship of the written word, science, facts, all this. It's just insanity. And so for them, I said, the Enlightenment is kind of their weird version of the Trinity. It's the serpent, the apple, and Eve all at the same time. And it's really screwed up.
It is definitely screwed up. I should say I have a hard time controlling my facial expressions when I hear nonsense. So people are they're seeing how I'm reacting, and maybe that's not.
Who cares? Don't worry about it.
It really gives me a headache just to think about how ridiculous the whole thing is.
But
it really gives me a headache.
But it's again, you're not going to get your head cut off, and you're not going to get burned alive. You're not going to be hung for breaking, woke ideology or whatever. But you might not get a job. Like, atheists. I know, like, I had a friend of mine who was in Egypt, and he had to get rid of his social media because he didn't want prospective employers to know he was atheist.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Like, but they're doing that here.
It's the same. Yeah. It's
and
also
to make somebody unemployable, like, that is pretty much a death sentence.
Yeah.
It is.
Right?
But I mean, one thing I joked about too was I said that, when you're Muslim, you have one Sirat al-Mustaqim to walk, but like now I feel like I got to juggle about 15 or 20 of them, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah.
No, in Arabic we have a saying, قطع الأعناق ولا قطع الأرزاق, which basically means it's better to kill someone than to kill their livelihood.
Yeah. It makes sense. That makes sense, right? You just completely destroy a person, destroy their family, take everything away from them. I would rather actually be hung, to be honest.
And that's what the woke is doing, and that's to a large extent. Like, we have Islamic banks that refuse to hire non-Muslims, like Christians. They're part of the fabric. Ridiculous.
Again, the woke. This is where the woke sort of pissed me off, because like they're very comfortable to criticize Christianity. They're very uncomfortable when it comes to criticizing Islam.
Yeah.
However, if you go to somewhere like Pakistan, it's completely the opposite way around.
Yeah.
The Muslims are in complete power and control. Like, as a Christian, you can clean the streets, or you can clean people's toilets, right? You can be a refuse collector.
Yeah.
Like, you're so limited, and they are persecuted every single day. Their life is hell. They're kidnapping their daughters, they're raping their daughters, forcefully converting them, marrying them, forcing them to conversion, all of these kinds of things, right? Yet the woke aren't talking about it at all. Have we lost debate?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh no. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, sorry, I got kicked off for a second.
Okay.
But yeah,
we were like, was that a little bit too gammony for you?
No. But I mean, like this whole thing, like it just drives me insane.
I know.
Yeah, but they're always absent where they're needed, like where their hysteria might actually be useful. Although they're not a very useful bunch, because it's all about their emotions rather than doing anything constructive. If you're that concerned about minority rights, go and try and fight for minority rights in countries where there's actually no minority rights. Like you just said, Jordan, Pakistan, Iran.
But the thing
they're
is,
not there.
With intersectionality created a hierarchy of victims, right? And there's the skin color, there's the religion, there's the gender, sexual orientation, and the more layers you add, the more of a victim you are. As you said, you get more victim points, right?
Yeah.
And the thing with the woke is that they care for the victims of the white man.
Yeah, it's moronic.
But victims of non-whites, which are everywhere, nobody cares about them.
Okay, but yes and no. Like, so now, like I said, Asians are considered white or white adjacent, because they're doing better. But the hierarchy and the breakdown and everything. But they just, again, like a lot of this. If you go tell a Muslim woman to take off the hijab, you're colonizing her again. Right? It's that's part of what it is too. They don't want to criticize other cultures because of that relativism. Because my culture did something. My culture did this and that. But it's like,
here's the thing: when it comes to the veil, I do have an issue. Like, I wouldn't go to a woman and demand that the veil, because I'm doing exactly the same. Someone who would tell me to put on the veil, right? But like, they prevent the whole discussion around the veil.
They do, but I don't like how there's this kind of hijab washing of history at the moment. There was they keep kind of really celebrating every time a hijabi does something in Britain, as if no Muslim woman or brown woman or woman of colors ever had any fucking success until she put something on her head. Like, what? It's really quite disgusting. As if a woman's. It's kind of like celebrating the worst elements of female freedom in the Muslim world. But also, I forgot, I wanted to come back on that MCB interview actually, because she's been hired as a spokesperson for the Muslim Council of Britain, who have a lot of money, by the way, a ridiculous amount of money. It makes my bumhole clench when I think of how much money that organization has. And they couldn't PR train her to answer a simple question. If she can't handle one interview, and as a spokesperson for an organization, that is your role. If you can't fulfill that function, then fuck off and do something else.
And
right?
The thing is, with that interview, the clip ended with her saying, I don't think this is part of the parameters of my roles and duties as the first elected female. And I thought that what the, you're the first elected female. If you're not gonna be worried about the situation of Muslim women, who is going to be worried about it?
No, she's worried about protecting the image of the MCB. That's it. She's not worried about not worried about Muslim women. That's going to be a lie. So same with the Muslim Council of Britain. They're not concerned about any Muslims in Britain. They're concerned about their funding, their revenue stream, and their image, and that's it.
And nobody actually criticizes her position when it came to that question. Everybody's criticizing Emma Barnett on this, and one of them was Faiza Shaheen, who's actually the lead on inclusion. It says on her webpage, the lead on inclusion challenge in NYT Center on International Cooperation. She's a lead on inequality, but she doesn't care about inequality against women within the Muslim communities. What does no. But that's the thing with intersectionality. It doesn't only it pits all the victim groups against each other, and then it pits the groups from within against each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but but it's so if you got rid of that intergroup conflict, but you didn't get rid of whiteness, you won't have solved anything. So their first thing is to get rid of whiteness. So it's, it's like whatever. They have to kill the kuffar. So once everyone becomes woke, it's the same thing as Islam. Islam will be the religion of peace when everyone is Muslim.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? Then you'll have peace. So when everyone is woke, then you'll have a better world.
Yeah.
It's a kind of demolition project, though, isn't it? They're kind of set out to destroy as much as they can and kind of create a new year zero.
Yeah, but they say disrupt and dismantle. They want to disrupt and dismantle.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with disrupting when there's an actual goal behind it. There's a vision behind it. But what they're going after is just, again, performative crap.
Yep. But that's just it. Like they would rather, like, okay, the Real Estate Association of Canada or whatever, I don't know, like their association of real estate agents, right, for nationwide, they no longer want to use the term master bedroom because it evokes slavery. Okay, like that's what they're concerned.
That's exactly what I think whenever I think of master bedrooms.
But that's what they're concerned about. They're concerned about the magic words. Like the education system in the United States is just appalling. They have kids who are falling behind like crazy in San Francisco, but the school board just spent I don't know how much money to have some council to rename 50 high schools because some of them were named after Abraham Lincoln. Like Jesus Christ, like it is performative. That's all it is. It's like
what is that
like,
thing?
Yeah,
it's
like those people who say mashallah after everything. Like Jesus Christ, stop.
It doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't mean anything.
No, but it's like,
and to think that they are like, I'm pretty sure a lot of the minorities they claim to serve or help, they're not really pleased with this. I'm pretty sure, there's a faction of them that are going like, what the hell is this?
But you don't need that. Like, okay, I worked for so I did some work with the Canadian government in Haiti after the earthquake, and no one asked the Haitians what they needed.
No.
It was just aid organizations coming in saying, here, you get this.
That's the problem with aid in general, but
but I mean, like, that's what this is too. It's like again, like I used to call them benevolent bigots because they'd say they want to do good, but they come in and it's like, here, you need this. It's like, you're not asking, like, okay, I worked 4 years up in an Inuit community in Northern Canada, and the victimhood thing, like living up in Northern Canada, I mean, it is brutally cold. Like winters last forever. In the summer, you're eaten alive by bugs. You have to be hardy, strong people to live out there. But they treat them like victims. They do every single little thing for them. They don't let them do anything. And it's just anything that goes wrong, it's not your fault. It was because of the white people. And it's
what we call institutionalizing, right?
Yeah.
So that these people can't do anything for themselves anymore. And nothing's their fault. You're beating your daughter is not your fault.
No.
You're harming your wife. That's not your fault. You kick the shit out of your sons. It's not your fault. It's everything somebody else's fault. There's no personal responsibility at all. It's institutionalizing them, really.
Yeah, they're fostering a sense of complacency.
But and you're creating people who are perpetually dependent on you, and it's like you're doing this more and more. I mean, they don't look at, it's a taboo to talk about this. Like, I don't know the stats for Canada because we don't take racial stats here, which, but like poor white people in the United States, like the opioid crisis and all this, like you're not looking at what's going on. You're not looking, like, if you set out a policy to help poor rural communities, yes, you'd help more white people than you would black or brown.
Yeah.
But that's just because there's more of them, but you'd fix everything.
Yeah. That's it. Look, if every time you hear about some of these woke retards, and I'm sorry, I can't.
No, that's fine.
They're woke tards. They're absolute fucking morons. Whenever you hear them crowing on about, poverty disproportionately affects black people. All right, well then deal with fucking poverty. Because if you deal with poverty, those people disproportionately affected by poverty are going to disproportionately benefit. But if you just go and help poor black people, everybody else that's poor is going to, not only are they going to still be in poverty, they're going to be doubly pissed off. And that is a sure way to create actual racism, because you've just targeted those resources to one demographic, and they're going to go, oh great, you've left us behind.
But here's the thing with CRT, we shouldn't care about white people's emotions.
But it's not just like the white people or whatever, like, but you shouldn't want to, but okay, Camille Foster, I don't know if you saw this, or I don't know if you know it. Okay, but he was on Bill Maher a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about this, and he brought up COVID. So the CDC said they're going to give, they wanted to, one of the recommendations was to give out the vaccine according to race and blah, 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 blah. And so the other person on the panel came up and said, oh, well, what about, like people, like black people living more in, like, smaller housing, like more grouped together. And he's like, well, that's an urban thing. It's like, if you fix the policies to, like, okay, we're going to fix this problem in urban communities, you fix that problem for everyone. He's like, don't make it racialized. And it's like, so now when if you want to talk about Ahmadis in Pakistan, it's like, oh, you're attacking brown folk. It's like, no, there's a problem with the Ahmadi, what's going on with the Ahmadi community. And it doesn't, and then out here it's like, oh, all Ahmadis are so, peaceful. It's like, no, there's some pernicious ideas coming out of the Ahmadi community as well. Where we're asking for them not to be persecuted, but you don't have to, like, deify them either. Like,
exactly. They can't do that kind of nuanced thinking, though. Everything's very, very simplistic. Sorry.
No, sorry. You can't be colorblind. This is one thing, which actually goes against what someone like MLK stood for, right? You can't be colorblind. You have to see color in everything, which is I don't know. Like, for me, it's racist. But they treat everything as a function of race, right? And then they come up with solutions because of that treatment, and those are not even solutions. They fuck up the whole thing, right? Whereas, I mean, if you ask me, looking from the outside, I think what's going on in the US is a class issue mainly.
100%. I mean, like, okay, race has obviously something to do with it, and
Yes.
you can have a legitimate conversation about things like black people, okay, slavery, but then after slavery, like the Jim Crow laws. So you had redlining, so you couldn't buy a home in certain areas, you couldn't own property, you couldn't do this, you can get proper rates. Another big thing was the GI Bill. So soldiers that came back after World War II, and the Korean War, the GI Bill wasn't given to black soldiers; it was only given to white ones. And I think some black soldiers got it. So not getting a college education, that again reduces your earnings, and that again reduces your wealth. So you can look at that and you can say, you know what, this had an effect. And so when we want to build up those communities, it's going to take some more money. But those are, you can have those internal conversations. You can have, but again, this is just Biden recently. It's just a speech he made, but the whole speech was really good. It was a little 5-minute clip of like what he was talking about his budget, and he was, we'll help rural communities, we'll help all this, we'll help restaurants, da da da. But he started off by saying we're going to focus on black, Asian or Latino Asian. It's like, no, don't do that.
No.
Yeah,
but they don't understand that. And also bear in mind, it helps them not spend masses. If they're going to only spend on ethnic minorities, then they don't have to deal with large scale problems. That's what I believe. But the one thing, there's only one tiny thing that I think we can thank the woke for the first time ever, people that never ever mentioned the word class are actually talking about class. That's the only thing I can thank this shit pit for. But other than that, we haven't got anything to really thank them for, other than being really, really divisive, really. But I think they ought to understand how capitalistic they are, really. If Ben and Jerry's and Innocent and various kind of businesses are jumping on board with this woke shite, then the kind of so-called anti-capitalists are really spoon-feeding like weapons and useful tools to capitalist corporations. Right?
But like Ibram Kendi, Twitter gave him $10 million.
What the fuck?
Twitter gave him $10 million. Yeah.
Or I don't know if they gave it directly to him or his foundation at Boston University, but still, I'm sorry, like Kendi spreads racism. It's insane.
Yeah, exactly. It's very insane. But that's the
very anti-capitalist.
The things with the woke culture, it's transpiring into the corporate sector, into brands, into if you're not saying what you're supposed to say in terms of wokeism, you're going to be boycotted.
But woke ideology really helps facilitate real targeted marketing. It's really useful for that. Yeah. So if they think that they are anti-capitalist, they're fucking deluded. And that makes me feel really, really warm and fuzzy inside. When they smear shit on themselves, like they're doing right now, like facilitating the very thing that they're hysterically shouting against. It just makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside, because I don't need to do anything against you guys. You guys are doing it to yourself. You guys want big business to die. You're like facilitating the growth of big business, helping them target marketing, and like kind of seeing what works, what doesn't work for them. You're kind of handing that to them. Great.
But they're also killing off they're helping big business grow and whatever, but they're going to kill off small businesses. Like the amount of
they are.
They go after a restaurant that serves burritos and they're not Mexican. Cultural appropriation. They had two shut down in Portland like that.
Yeah. And it's interesting that they always go after the smaller businesses, right? I've never seen them go and like kind of smash up. Sure, when they riot, and we can't call them peaceful protests, can we? They are fucking riots. When they do riot, they just go nuts. But largely the smaller businesses that do suffer, they're never going to be able to reopen, are they? Most people put all of their life savings in starting a business, and they've got no shame in the fact that they're doing that. It's disgusting.
But there was that book. Sorry, I just want to say that, like, that book that came out this past summer was in defense of looting.
Defense of looting, yeah.
Okay. She says in the book, she's talking about the riots in the 90s. I think the Rodney King riots in LA. and the Korean shop owners who were standing on the roads of their stores with shotguns and stuff. She said the Koreans were the Koreans, and then she also talked about Jews, but she said the Koreans and the Jews were the face of capital in their neighborhoods. So, like those riots this summer, and compare it to like Capitol Hill. So those people, when Antifa and all that are out fighting, for them it's the whole system. They see Starbucks is equivalent to the Capitol Hill. It is the whole system. You have to take down the system everywhere. You know, like if injustice, you know, if there's injustice everywhere, then no one's free, right? Everyone has to be free for, you know, you to be free, blah blah blah, all that crap. So they go after, for them, like capitalism is the source of power, you know. So a little mom and pop shop, that's capitalism. That's the face of capitalism. That was like in communism, the farmers were the petit bourgeoisie. So that's why he didn't want farmers. He wanted the working class. He didn't want the serfs. And it's the same thing here. So they're going after what they see as seat of power. Those guys on Capitol Hill, they saw, you know, government as a seat of power. So they went after that. The two, like, the real nut bars who were on Capitol Hill who wanted to take the place over. I'm not talking about the guy who stole it and stole the podium and stuff like that, but the real nut bars, okay, they're crazy and they wanted to go after the seat of power. And just like Antifa goes after Starbucks or like the mom and pops, those little, because that to them is capitalism, that to them is power. That's the way they see things. It's really screwed up.
Yeah. I think if your instinct is destruction, then you're not in a fit place to be kind of you know, campaigning and doing activism. I don't think that you're mentally stable enough. You need to be in a therapy room. You got to work through your own shit before you do stuff like that, right? And a lot of these people that we see now that kind of take to the streets are very mentally unstable. Like I've kind of found myself gradually taking a back seat with a lot of things, because I feel like if I saw these people in the street, I wouldn't have a conversation with them. I'd feel like I'm stood in an insane asylum. And what stable person would go into an insane asylum and start arguing with a mental person, right?
Like Extinction Rebellion. Like, oh my God.
Right? You just can't reason with these people. So
just one thing quickly, we're coming up to almost 2 hours. It's like an
yeah,
hour and 50 minutes. You want to like start wrapping it up?
Yeah.
Well, thanks. I don't want to keep you guys too long. Thanks a lot. Like it's middle afternoon for me, but it's later for you guys.
Okay. Yeah, I've got dinner to make, mate.
So if you guys have any last words, and then we can just wrap this up.
Well, I just think people, you know, need to chill the hell down with this whole woke thing, and allow other people to decide what they want to do, right?
Yeah.
Go back to classical liberalism, maybe. I don't know, but I just need personally, I need a space where I can actually express my thoughts.
Yeah.
Without having to worry about who am I offending.
Yeah.
You know, it's not my responsibility if someone gets offended.
No, you're not a babysitter, right?
I'm not. But I don't have the space here in my own country, unfortunately, for many different reasons. I look to the West for that space. However, it seems like that space is compromised. They need to stop doing this.
Yeah.
That's really sad to hear, actually, that like the space that you feel like you could have used in the past is now quite a hostile space, actually, isn't it?
Definitely it is. Yeah.
That's very, very sad.
The amount of anxiety I feel every single time I'm writing something is unbelievable. And it's not just about the anxiety of having to deal with my community here. It's also the anxiety of having to deal with many other groups that I might have offended. I can't deal with this. It's not right. It's not healthy. It will not take us anywhere good.
100%.
Yeah.
I think if you're constantly offended, then you really have to deal with your own sort of personal issues, don't you? And I think also, like to activists in any sphere, really, I think I think the word respect has been muddied by people who want to prevent discussion. Often, you know, we hear like Muslim activists saying, particularly those that peddle the whole Islamophobia narrative, that we want you can say whatever you want, but with respect. And I think that for me, I would replace that with manners, because I think manners matter, and you can still say very offensive things, but be well mannered, right? I think when you descend into being just rude and obnoxious, then that's counterproductive. I've watched some old BBC debates actually, between some people that some that I agree with, some that I massively disagree with. But what I found was, even though some of the discussions were really, really challenging and sometimes very uncomfortable, both sides were well mannered. And I think that's your own responsibility. If you're going to have these discussions, it's your responsibility to make sure that you're not a dick in that interaction, because it's counterproductive in the long run. But also, truth really matters. Like, even if it's really uncomfortable, the truth matters, and it doesn't matter where it's coming from. Like, if I say something and somebody on the far right says something and it's exactly the same thing, if it's true, it shouldn't matter that they're saying it. And I think in the kind of Anglosphere context, both Muslims and ex-Muslims are responsible for the current mess that we're in terms of being able to criticize Islam, because both sides, the Muslims don't want ex-Muslims talking about it because they're no longer Muslims. The ex-Muslims don't want the far right talking about it because, you know, we've got to protect that discussion from that demographic. And actually, if it's the truth, it shouldn't matter who's saying it. Their motives might not be great, but that's not your issue, really. If something's the truth, it's just the truth, even if it's coming from a very uncomfortable source. And freedom of speech also comes with the kind of freedom to not engage with something if you find it uncomfortable. Like recently, Yasmin Alabaya Brown, who I really don't like actually, tweeted something about Britain being massively racist, and, you know, just kind of went off on this tangent that she usually does. And lots of people underneath were saying, well, I did kind of think you were going to leave by now. Because she herself several times has said she's going to leave, you know, post-Brexit, post-Tories being elected, like it's happened so many times. I know the context in which they're saying it, but because of the historic connotations in Britain, it still sits uncomfortably with me. But all I do is just don't engage with it. I don't make a big song and dance about it. I don't call them racist because I know exactly the connotations. And someone like her, all she'll do is regurgitate that shit again and again and go, see, this proves my point that this is a racist country. But they're saying it to her because she's been saying it publicly so many times. So, like, context of a conversation matters as well. And it's our responsibility when we're having those interactions to ensure that we're honest about context as well when those conversations are occurring, which I think a lot of people aren't. I think I've just kind of done an ending rant a bit. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Well, yeah, thanks you both for coming on. Thanks everyone for listening. And yeah, so like apparently I've got a comment up that's hidden with your name. So it's Izzy Diab and Sadia Hameed. If you guys want to let people know where they can follow you, I'll put when this comes out live, I'll put your Twitters in there.
Yeah, on Twitter. It's basically, Abaid will have the handles, and you can follow us from there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. And
thank you for having us, Abaid.
I'll try to do something like this again soon, hopefully.
Sure.
Excellent.
No.